Put them off to a kingdom, put the king to a god, put the god to an unbeliever, who don't believe it. Please fight to the night, or right around, no church in the wild. To a mama, put the mom to a kingdom, put the king to a god, God to an unbeliever, who don't believe anything. Rise alive, don't you hear the wild?
Hello. Hopefully you folks can hear me. This is our normal everyday, well, not every day, quite the opposite actually. This is our normal post running the game stream. Actually, I feel, while I quite like Robert Glasper in the background, I think State Azure is better for background of the live stream. Somebody was asking somebody was saying, describing what they were hearing as auto-tune. And I said, it's not auto-tune, it's a vocoder. And somebody said, auto-tune is a way of quantizing somebody's voice, right? Where when you sing, a normal person, a human, will not hit every single note exactly mathematically correctly. You know, like an A sharp is 433. I don't remember what the actual number is, 433 hertz or whatever. And a normal human will have some kind of like minor variation, and a person who's not a good singer will have quite a lot of variation, and they will be not in tune. And so what people call auto-tune is just a way of quantizing the human voice, which will change the pitch of your voice and lock it to the mathematically correct number of hertz for that note. So instead of going you'll go it'll automatically, it'll remove any kind of like variance. But a vocoder is a completely different piece of technology. It has nothing to do with any of that. And in fact, vocoders, which became famous like in the 80s, a lot of early hip hop acts used vocoders to sound robotic because the music they were playing, it had a lot of kind of like krautrock stuff in the background to it. Was developed originally. Vocoder was developed by the United States Navy as a way of compressing audio down into a really, really tiny data stream that you could broadcast over radio, and it wouldn't lose fidelity and it would still be comprehensible. And I don't know that they ever actually used it for that. I mean, it worked, right? You take the human voice, which has a lot of dynamic range in it, and just crunch it way, way down to something that has almost no dynamic range. And that's what we mean when we say it sounds robotic. But it's not in any way quantized. If you do a scoop or a slide in your voice, it'll be there in the vocoded info. And it's just I don't know why the Robert Glasper experiment uses a lot of vocoder, but they do. But that's something, by the way, that I don't think Robert Glasper does anymore. I think that was something unique to the Robert Glasper experiment, which is now, I believe, basically retired. So let's make sure that's too loud. Hello, you are way too loud. You are way too loud. Behave yourself. Yeah, and let's turn this down so that you folks can hear it and I can hear it. Anyway, let's see. I really like Will Morris. Thank you for the £5. The last running the game video made running D&D click into place. Wow, that's amazing. Thank you, Matt. You saved my D&D career. Well, that's one of the things we talk about here in these live streams is the last running the game video, which, you know, the story I tell is accurate. I was working on awarding experience, which is just not very interesting to me. Although the history of awarding experience is somewhat interesting to me, and the amount of work my friends and I used to go to try to. It's funny, one of the things I discovered, and I'll put this in the next, well, it won't be the next video, but I'll put this in the video for this subject whenever I get to it, is that the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide explicitly says having characters of different levels in the same party is no big deal. And in fact, as soon as I read that, I was like, actually, yeah, considering the flat math of 5th edition, it's probably less of a big deal to have like a 5th level character walking around with 4th level characters in this edition than any other. But that didn't used to be true. And also, I don't think people play D&D the way we did in the 80s, especially the 80s, or the 80s and a little bit in the 90s, where like experience points were very much score. And we played so much, like we would play several times a week easily, that it was impossible for any player to be at every session, right? You had school, a lot of us had part-time jobs, we were in high school and then college. And so there was we had social lives, we had girlfriends back then. So there was just no way you could make it to every session and you would get behind in XP. And it was a big deal. It was a huge, big deal. And then when people died, not people, we didn't have any people die, but we had characters die all the time. When a character died, there was a huge argument and debate, and it lasted for 15 years about what level should you come back at, because there was this implicit notion that I survived and my character survived and your character died. Well, you should suffer some penalty. I played better than you. I was alive. I lived. And therefore, you should not automatically come back with a character that has the same amount of XP that I have. And when we first started, the idea was you came back at first level. And I think there might even be rules for that. You came back at first level. And then slowly over time, we became less interested in this kind of, it's not competitive, I guess it's competitive, this competitive notion of Dungeons and Dragons, but it wasn't competitive between us and the DM, it was competitive between the players. Surviving an adventure was a big deal, and if you didn't survive, you should suffer some penalty. And then the only debate we had was, what should that penalty be? And over time, we got less and less hung up on that, the penalty didn't go away, it just became less and less extreme. I remember a friend of mine came up with a really complex formula for calculating what level should a character come back at when they're re-entering a party that has characters of multiple different levels in it. So he did some math to figure out, I think he basically just summed over and then 4th edition came along, and 4th edition just said all the characters are the same level. Period. And as soon as it did that, as soon as it said everybody's the same level, forget about it. We were like, oh, this is way easier. Actually, that's why did we ever play it the other way? Of course, now we were in our 30s at that point, and so our attitude toward this competitive feeling had gone away. So Tommy Warren, that I would support whatever ruling you came up with for a question like that. One of the best episodes ever, says Jack Grimble. I'm glad you're enjoying my first novel. I've been working Beta Centauri. I believe in you, though. You could someday be promoted to Alpha Centauri. I've been working on a tabletop game for Fallout, and I want to get permission from Bethesda. Any advice on how I can do that? Yeah, what you need is probably about between $30,000 and $70,000. Probably closer to the $30,000. Go to them and say, I want to license your property. Here you go. And then you also need to have the production capacity to support a game that they would believe would do well. Because even if you give them a lot of money, they're not going to just give you a license for the money. They're going to expect that they're giving their license to somebody who's going to make a product that will make them look good. So you need to have some experience, ideally several games under your belt already. Maybe some awards. That's not a joke. And then you'll be fine. Any plans for Nethack stream? No, we don't plan Nethack streams. They just sort of happen spontaneously. Joe Auerbach. Joe, I recognize you. You are welcome. I hope that the video was useful. It seems like it was. Have I ever looked into Pathfinder? Nope. If I were gonna play another RPG besides D&D, it would have to be really, really different, because otherwise, what's the point? I've already got D&D. I'm happy with 5th edition. I'm very happy with 5th edition, in point of fact. So when I think about other RPGs, even if they were in like the traditional fantasy mode, they would have to be very different than any edition of D&D. Michael O'Rourke asks about my 3rd novel. It's not in progress right now. Got a lot of work to do on MCDM stuff. Remember that, like, writing novels is never something I've done full time. In fact, every book I've written 2 novels so far, and both of them were written during times when I was frustrated with my day job because I didn't feel like I had control. I didn't feel like I had control over what I was doing, and so I wrote novels because there I did have control. But now I run MCDM, and I do have control over that. So that motivation is gone. But that doesn't mean the book's not going to happen. It just means I need to kind of have more time. I need to feel it's tough. Owning a company is not easy. It's a huge burden, and having employees whose families depend on their paychecks and the work that we do, the work I do principally, not exclusively, but principally the work I do is incredibly stressful. And so it's difficult to give myself permission to put that down and work on other stuff. However, that being said, we made a lot of progress in 2020 toward reorienting MCDM so that it's not just my output. And that's bringing on freelance writers, bringing on James Introcaso to manage them. So that all points toward a future where I can do stuff like work on Fighter, work on audiobooks. I think I'd like to give that another shot. Oh, sorry. Camera. I'll make sure I get to these. Thank you, Tanner Agnew. If indeed I do run MCDM, I'm not a piece of hash. I'm in charge of factory records, I think. I feel that way. I feel that very strongly. I'm in charge of MCDM, I think. Do I have any advice on how to introduce a new player to the game? You say, here's a character sheet. Here's a character sheet, sit down. Will Arcadia be available outside Patreon? Probably like a month after we publish it. Each issue should go up on the store, we think. Fred Curry. Thank you. Oh, that Fred Curry. I remember you. Right? Those were good times. Wow, crazy. I hope you're doing well, Fred. I think about those. I think about the philosophy club, not infrequently. In fact, I still, well, and those classes too. I remember, I think about this a lot. Like once a week, I remember there were people, in those classes, there were regularly, this is a thorny subject to bring up, but who dares wins. When I was in college, and, I still remember, this is kind of the first time I think I ever encountered this in the wild, but real live people who I was interacting with live in a classroom or teacher's office scenario, who would say, if it wasn't for their religious beliefs, if it wasn't specifically for their fear of punishment in the afterlife, they would commit sexual violence routinely. And I was like, I just don't actually think you believe that. I think that someone has convinced you that is true. I don't think you believe that. I don't think you believe that the way I believe there's a monitor here in front of me. I think you're repeating something someone told you that sounded good. It sounded reasonable, so now you're repeating it. Because if I actually believed that you believed that for real, then you probably should be on some kind of medication. But there were several people, and they argued that very strongly. And I used to think that was ridiculous, but now I'm not sure it's as ridiculous as I thought it was. Robin, thank you for the 10 euros. No, there's no way I'm going to pronounce. I can get the Robin Vanden, but then you got two capital letters in your last name. I don't know what to do with that. I had a friend of mine, a coworker, whose name was. F. What was it? I can't remember, but I could. No, it kills me that I can't remember it. But he was from Scandinavia, and his name was spelled one way, and it was pronounced completely different. Fuck, I can't remember. If Jordy were here, he'd remember. Well, so Mr. D Waters 88. That's a auspicious year for me. I graduated high school. Gave $5. I presume that's usually when you see a number in somebody's name, it's because that's either when they graduated high school or when they were born. You mentioned DMs and players having a literal wall between them. What are your thoughts on not having a screen? Jim Murphy runs without a screen, or at least he used to. But Jim Murphy also has had more TPKs as a dungeon master than anybody I know. Although that might be unique to our group. I often TPKs are a difference between the dungeon master's expectations and the player's expectations. They're not a sign of a bad DM. They're just a sign of a misalignment of, you haven't learned that DM's language. And also Jim would traditionally be like, when there was a new edition of D&D, he would jump in and run it because he would be interested in seeing the rules and stuff. And the first time you run a new system, not unusual for there to be a TPK. But the flip side of it was Jim didn't have a screen to roll behind. So when things started going badly, there wasn't a whole lot Jim could do to, he wasn't trying to kill us. So that's the only reason really I use a DM screen, is because I want to be able to curate the experience. That's the Dungeon Master's job, is curating the experience for the players. So, you know, I'm in favor of lots of, you know, I think there's probably, I think the players should look to the Dungeon Master as a kind of authority. If you describe the world that the players' characters are experiencing, and they don't believe it, then they have to have suspension of disbelief, willing suspension of disbelief. And the Dungeon Master's screen helps, it's theater, right? It's theater. It helps grant the Dungeon Master a certain amount of authority. And that authority may be unearned, right? I'm just a random idiot at the table like the rest of you. But now that I've got this screen here, you're going to perceive me a little bit differently. And it's going to help you believe in what I'm saying a little bit more. It's like a little force multiplier. And that's important, because if the players don't believe in the reality of the secondary world, then it's not going to work. Robert Monroe, thank you for the 10 bucks. I have no idea how to untangle the web of banish and counter banish that you have spun there. That sounds like a Jeremy Crawford question. I want to make sure the folks who have thrown money at us get their question answered. We've done William Lawler, we've done Q&As before. I'm not a huge fan of the Q&As we've done before, because we're going to do more Q&A videos, but I have a plan for them, because the Q&A videos aren't evergreen. They're actually, that's not true. They are evergreen, but they're not portable. People don't know what they're getting into when they see that it's a live Q&A. When they see they're not live, by the way. When they see it's an MCDM Q&A, they have no idea what's in here, right? So I think in the future we'll do Q&As that are themed. Hey, ask me like an AMA. Ask me anything about writing. Ask me anything about game development. Ask me anything about running MCDM. Ask me anything about, you know, dungeon mastering. So this is not going to be like we've done 92 videos on this subject, but these are subjects that I get a lot of questions about in the live stream. And so, like a FAQ, like the Q&As should be like a FAQ, where if somebody has a question about writing or game dev or running MCDM, like there's a lot of people who see our videos, and because they are evergreen and they're being discovered all the time, there are a lot of people out there that think I still work at Turtle Rock Studios, and I quit that place like 2.5 years ago, if not longer. So we definitely need more and better Q&As, but they should be like themed. A Spirit threw me 5 Canadian Canuckistan dollaroonies. Any advice for getting started publishing or playtesting homebrew material? Well, there's the DMs Guild. I mean, first you should be putting your material in front of your players. I was lucky that I had friends who put up with my aspiring game design nonsense for years. I would subject them, and I think in retrospect they were probably putting up with it because they, maybe even more than me, recognized that this was something I was going to try and make a living out of. But I would design entire 4X games like Stellaris and put it in front of them, and they'd be like, okay, all right, let's play this. Let's humor Matt. So your players are your first line of defense, and you should learn a lot about design and playtesting through that process. But then just put it up on the DMs Guild. Put it up on the DMs Guild. The trick is getting attention to it. I don't know what to tell you about that. I don't know how to tell you how to get eyeballs on your product. That makes me super happy, Sunred. It seems like there are a lot of a lot of people in the MCDM community are experienced dungeon masters, and it's all my videos do is help contextualize things you already knew. And if, somebody else were doing these videos, they'd probably be contextualizing them in a different way that would also be useful. My videos are not, my advice is not the only way to do things, but it makes me happy that experienced DMs get value out of my nonsense. Joe Franklin, $5. I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. It makes me happy. Well, any tips on running a combat encounter against an immortal evil villain? Well, first of all, I would hope that they're not immortal, because they're going to die. We expect the players are going to live. But, that's what action-oriented design is all about, is making villains feel competitive against the heroes when the heroes have 6 actions per round. I would check out the Vecna. I mean, I did a whole video on how I would run Vecna, and we should probably do more stuff like that. I think people like that. $20 from Clark. Watch Clark. Do you hear me? What modifications did I make to Night Below? What modifications did I make to Night Below? Well, I made a lot. Like I took out I put like a whole I put a dark dwarf city in there that I stole. I mean, too many. But the problem with Night Below, and they fixed this in Out of the Abyss, quite dramatically they fixed this. The problem with Night Below is it starts with a big sandbox campaign, which I really like, and a big chunk of that content has nothing to do with the main plot line, which helps the players feel like this is a real place. Not every problem we're dealing with dovetails into the central tension, which is like reality. Like there might be a central tension where you're living right now. There certainly is where I am, but not everything I read about dovetails into that. Not every problem I deal with in my day deals with that. And so that sandbox nature helped really establish this region of the world as a real place. But then the problem, of course, is now that the heroes are invested in that, the next thing they do is they go spend the next 10 levels in the Underdark. And the entire time they're down there, they're like, I want to get back to this. So that's always a problem with Night Below. Out of the Abyss fixes it by saying, what sandbox? You start in the Underdark as a prisoner with no past or, whatever past. Thank you for the $20. I don't know what's in there, but it's weird and it's pissed off. Will I write a modular campaign setting in my own world? Yeah, that's on the docket. It's not one of the next products, but yeah, we'll definitely. I talked with James Intricasso, who joins us full-time in February, and he and I brainstormed a list of potential products, and definitely something like a Vasloria book and an adventure to go with it is on the table. Would I ever do a video on running a sci-fi game? I don't know what I know about that subject that is different than what I know about running D&D. But thank you for the $5, J Exonauts. Carlos Mojica. I seem to recognize your name. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for hanging out with us. I know people get frustrated because they're like, does he only answer questions in chat if there's money attached to it? And it's like, well, no, not only, but at least. I at least want to answer all the questions that people throw money at. Brian Duggan threw me €6.66 demi-euros. I don't know. I actually have no idea what the subdivision of a euro is. Hail Satan. I thank you for your ferocious work ethic, he says. That makes me happy. I think that most of the MCDM community is the YouTube audience, and to them it seems like my work ethic is anything but ferocious. However, what they don't see is that I've been working nonstop with only like half a day off every week for the past 7 months on Kingdoms and Warfare, and hopefully that shows, and hopefully we get more videos. We've already recorded next week's video, not a running the game video, but a video many of you I think will be interested in. $30 from Burn the Catalyst, Burn the Heretic. What's my opinion of gunpowder in a fantasy setting? Not a fan. Because I think it's out of genre. I think if it's got gunpowder, then it's not medieval fantasy, certainly. And that kind of, I think that being said, like, I'm not a fan of gunpowder in the kind of Tolkien-esque fantasy. But certainly if you're talking about Victorian fantasy, I would have no problem with that, or something in the Napoleonic fantasy. I would have no problem with that, but it would seem weird to me to like, there's gunpowder in Capital, but there wasn't until we started running the Chain of Acheron. And it was because I literally threw gunpowder in there because they arrived in Capital in a giant interdimensional squid ship. And I wanted the mundane, non-magical navy of Capital to be able to threaten that ship. And so I went, well, I think I need gunpowder. But then I came up with the idea that it was a monopoly that the Navy had. And that's interesting to me. It's interesting to me that now this resource is something that is monopolized, because that's a great tension, right? What happens when other people want some? What happens when other people start developing it? What does the Navy do? It's probably not going to be good. So $30 quite generous, by the way. James Archbold. It's like Archibald without an I or an ald and an old instead. Congratulations on your PhD. How How did having other friends run villains feed into that? Well, whenever you have, and keep in mind, most of the time in my games, it wasn't villains that my friends ran. It was just NPCs, characters that they had played in an earlier game, like my friend Aaron and the Lord of Dalrath, where I'm like, what would Lord Kenway do? Let me ask Aaron. He and I don't play together anymore. We've moved apart, all this other stuff. You know, I have lots of friends that have played what are now high-level NPCs. They played them as characters, and then the game ended, we moved away, whatever, and now their characters are retired, but I still ask them, hey, what would this character do? And that helps. That's always a way to kind of stimulate the creative juices. Would-be Sage says, Lord of the Rings literally has a gunpowder subplot involving Helm's Deep. Yeah, but I think it would be clear in the spirit of the question that we're talking about like flintlocks. And if you read a version of Lord of the Rings that had flintlocks in it, I think it was probably a pirated version. Cosmo Reverb. What advice would I give somebody who wants to get into tabletop design? Well, I don't know what's stopping you. If you mean get paid for it, that I have no advice on. There's no... I don't know. There's no... You have to get lucky. Are there going to be naval combat rules in warfare? No, because I don't think anybody wants 13th century naval combat rules or like 11th century. I don't think there's any audience for that, period. I think there's a small audience for like Napoleonics, right? Master and Commander type stuff, the Aubrey Maturin books. There's a small audience for that among the D&D audience, but those two genres are two different genres. Oh, I'm glad, Eric O'Brien. I'm about to run my deadliest encounter. Listen, the deadliest encounters I've ever run were deadly by accident, and the encounters that I thought were the most challenging and deadly turned out to be the players came up with a cakewalk. Joshua Mace, I remember you. Thank you for hosting those images. What are some of my favorite synthwave musicians? Well, I know he's not considered synthwave per se, but Comtrues is probably my favorite. And then after that and FM84, there aren't a lot of synthwave artists that I follow. I just follow YouTube channels that collate all that information. Did I miss anybody? I don't think so. Would I consider doing a deeper dive on running a game on fantasy grounds? No, I feel like I covered that pretty well in the video we did. NG Benji says they love the psionic abilities in Strongholds and Followers. I'm not incredibly happy with them. They needed a lot more robust testing. The Strongholds and Followers, from my point of view, is like really well produced homebrew, and it shows. The well produced part shows, but the homebrew part shows too. And it's kind of a very kitchen sink product. We threw a lot of ideas in there, and as a result, some of them did not get the attention I think they deserve. Psionics is certainly one of them. That's a subject that requires a lot more robust design and a lot more playtesting. So that's something we can do moving forward, and something I'd like to do is I would like to develop those psionic rules, but turn them into something real. Onslaught 6. Synthwave expat. I like that. Hey, it's Jim. How's it going, Jim? Look at this. Right? This is what happens when you don't go get your haircut for, I don't know how long it is, 9 months. How long is it going to get? I don't know. I'm super curious. Has it stopped growing? I don't know. Steely Dan! I'm glad that I feel like, thank you for the $10. I feel like that last video was a good video to come back from a break on. Do I have any advice on running a slod-based campaign? Well, I've never done that. You mean, what is a slod-based campaign? Is it a game where the players are slods? That would be interesting. That would be super interesting. I imagine it would be a lot of interdimensional nonsense, or at least it should be. And it would be cool. I would love to run a game where the players start as slods, and I have to come up with like, what is the slod homeworld like? What is, but there's a wide variety of slot to choose from, so it should be totally easy to turn them into PC classes. There is a enemy realm, or an NPC realm, depending on how you look at it, in Kingdoms and Warfare called Marauders of the Plains, which is supposed to be a catch-all category for any D&D monsters that we think of as being like intelligent, like weapon and spell using extraplanar entities, of which you can probably think of a bunch of different examples. None of them are open, so we can't reference them in the book. But that would be a good way to run a campaign like that, I think. How do I start a D&D campaign? You tell your friends, hey, we're playing D&D Thursday night, or Friday night, or Saturday. And you say, hey, I'm going to run D&D. You're a player. Bring munchies. See you there. And when they go, go, I heard yes. I heard that was a yes. See you there. That's what I do. That's literally what I do. That's how Lars and I became friends. I was like, this guy seems like he would be into. He was not a gamer of any analog stripe, and I'm a divvy when it comes to meeting people who would be gamers if only they knew the right people. And so I said, we're playing D&D. And he was like, okay. And then have an adventure ready, and I recommend the Delian Tomb because it seems like it's really successful. Seems like it's really successful as a thing. Alex C, $20, thank you. Hey man, I'm very new to these live streams. Well, listen, there's not really much to them. And Alex loved the novel I wrote. I don't care about money, but I want folks to read it. Well, that's the trick. It's not easy to write a book, actually. There aren't a lot of people that do it. But having written it, then the question is, how do you get people to read it? And the only advice I have is you either need to promote yourself, right? No one really paid attention to Priest until I started my YouTube channel. You need to either promote yourself or you need to go get an agent. And getting an agent is not easy. It's a very competitive market. But there are websites like Absolute Right, WRITE, Absolute Right, which will help you. Community websites, they can be pretty draconic in their advice. But that being said, people get published. So it's easy to put your book up on Amazon. It's very difficult. You can do it in half an hour. It's very difficult to get eyeballs on it. So that's why every writer who has an agent, the agent tells them, you need to be promoting yourself. You need to be putting yourself out there is what they say. And no writer likes doing that. Even I don't really like doing that. I would much rather let the work speak for itself. But that's the reality on the ground is you got to put yourself out there, get people to know who you are, and then they'll start paying attention to your book because otherwise it's very difficult. I remember when I first finished Priest, the first draft, I posted on /r/fantasy and I said, hey, I just finished my first novel, so it's free on Kindle for the next couple of days, which is something you can do. Amazon will let you do that. Put it on sale or give it away for a couple of days. And like 1,500 people downloaded it. It was a very popular post. But I had been participating in /r/fantasy for a couple of months, responding to threads. So there were some people there who recognized my name. I wasn't a dilettante, right? I wasn't just showing up just to promote something. That helped. But again, that's community, right? I was participating in this community. I was putting myself out there. Reddit's pretty anonymous. Even though your name is on the post, it's still pretty anonymous. But it seemed to make a difference. 1,500 people downloaded. I don't know how many of those people read it. I entered a contest, the self-published fantasy blog off. And my work, along with 10 or 13 others, got sent to one blogger. And they read all of them and then picked one that went into the final round. And they picked me. I was out of 113 people that entered, I was in the final 10, and then I placed either last or next to last. But I've had enormous success since then, I think, thanks to the YouTube channel. So that's the advice. I don't know what a PHP is, but I got 500 of them from Joseph Ramola. Hi, Matt. Thank you for being awesome. Thank you for being awesome. What do I think about old players coming back to run the villain? I think that's awesome. Yeah, no, yeah. Bonus points if you know what country. Is it the Philippines? Maybe? I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I like having your friends run other NPCs, friends that can't play D&D with you, is great because it gives you free ideas. They end up doing the thinking. And also, by the way, like I translate, like I've run games where I've done this a couple times now where the players in the campaign, I played with them, all of them solo for a while. Me and Austin played for a while. Me and Aaron played for a while, and their characters met each other in the game, in their solo games, but neither of them knew this was a PC. And so Aaron, playing the Lord of Dalrath, I talked about this in a video, said to me, we were doing this over Fantasy Ground, so this chat and stuff, and he was really interested in this character who he did not realize was under the PC. And anytime he would ask him questions, I would literally just message over Google Hangouts my friend Austin live and ask. But every time I do that, I also translate what they're saying. I don't just copy and paste it. It's like, yeah, that's what you think your character says. And in your game, that is what your character said. But that's not canonically what happened. It's up to me to determine canonically what happened. Because, for instance, like, Austin's not a writer. He knows what his character would do, but he doesn't necessarily know how his character would say it because he's not a role player. So I will take it and translate it. And that gives me the best of both worlds. I get all this great content and inspiration from the other players running these NPCs, but I'm still curating the experience. Remember what we said at the beginning of the stream? It's the Dungeon Master's job to curate the experience. If I miss anybody's chat, James Cook III. Loves my videos and my products and wants to send me something to look at. Alas, James, that is not a service I provide. I apologize. But if you believe in it and it's good, then you don't need me. Yeah, and you know, if that game is what inspires you, then I encourage you to kind of do your own version of it and put it out there and see what people think. Greg Colton. Is it true wizards tried to avoid paying the authors of Dragonlance? I have no idea what's true or what's not true. I don't think anybody does outside of a handful of people involved in the lawsuit. That's what the court will decide if indeed it goes to court. I've only seen one half of that complaint, and it's the complainers people's half of it, and I doubt it's the full story because it almost never is. That's all. That's what I know about that, if indeed that is anything to know. Do I have any suggestions for a pre-made campaign with a swashbuckler type feel? 7th Sea, John Wick's game 7th Sea is all about swashbuckling, I think. Well, I don't know. Is that true? There's a lot of swashbuckling in it. It's also about romance. You know, it's a very different game from the traditional fantasy RP game, but it's, I think, relatively well received. That's the first thing that comes to mind when I think of swashbuckling kind of game. I don't even know if there is anything, if there is another kind of swashbuckling, specifically that kind of pirates, high seas, Errol Flynn, Captain Blood type stuff. Chat might know. John D. Jones, well, thank you for being here and thank you for the $5. I appreciate it. Andrew Winecki, I'm guessing. There's more vowels in there than I pronounce, but I'm going to guess some of them are silent. $5, thank you very much. Matt, you're amazing. No, you're amazing. How do I stop being angry about the rules disparity between Baldur's Gate 3 and 5th edition? I have no idea why you would be angry about that. I have not played Baldur's Gate 3. Lars has played all the way through the current version. He likes it a lot. He says we can basically make the Chain of Acheron in there, and he wants us all to play it together. But it's only the Baldur's Gate Baldur's Gate 3 is an early access, and many of us want to wait for it to be out of early access. And it's only Act 1. So I haven't played it. I probably will. I will because of Lars's ringing endorsement. But I have no interest in, to me, it's kind of like, to me, a video game, I'm not interested in a video game of D&D. And I don't know why anybody is. But I like the idea of, you know, playing a fantasy character with a class and levels, and I kill monsters and I get experience points. But I don't care if a video game uses the rules of D&D. And in fact, I would be happier if it didn't. The rules for D&D exist so we can do this thing together at the table. If a computer is managing everything, then as far as I'm concerned, all bets are off, and the computer should do, the programmers and the designers and the artists and the effects artists and the animators should do everything to make just a badass game that I love, that feels like I'm playing through an epic story where I'm casting spells and I get to be a paladin or whatever, and I level up. I don't care if somewhere in the background there's a random number generator generating a random number between 1 and 20 in one increment steps, and then it's applying an attack bonus. In fact, I don't want to see any of that stuff. I don't ever want to. And in fact, I don't even really understand why you would bother coding those things in the first place. Why would you code a tabletop system for a video game? Just go directly from code to game. Like Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead Redemption, they don't start with a board game and then write code to simulate the game to make a video game out of it. To me, it's completely baffling. So I have zero interest in playing a game that is trying to adhere to the rules of a tabletop product. That is super, super weird to me. Like, we tried playing games over Tabletop Simulator. Didn't work. None of us cared about it. We were all like, if we're already, this is really a primitive experience compared to playing at the table together, let's just play Rocket League. Everybody's like, yeah. And that was way more fun. So I have no interest in any of that stuff. I have no interest in how well Baldur's Gate 3 adheres to the rules of 5th edition. That's all nonsense to me. But I am interested in it just in terms of, is it a fun fantasy game that I might like? And I liked the first couple Baldur's Gate games. So now I got to go back here and see what chats did I miss. Ross Liberty, $25. Thank you, Ross. Do I do session zeros with new players? Session 0 doesn't make any sense to me, because if you're getting together to play D&D, then that's the first session. I do a lot of work before we play to make sure the players understand what's going on. We did a whole video on that called Pitching Your Campaign, right? Where I said, okay, here are the campaigns I'm kind of interested in running right now. And we talk in those pitches, we talk about like all the assumptions of each of these games, like how lethal is this game? Would you expect your character to die at all? How much role playing is there? How much politics is there? How much combat will there be? These are all different sliders on the equalizer, of the pitches. So I try to make sure that the players, by the time we get together and play for the first time, they're well educated on what's going to go on. They have buy-in. We talk about buy-in, the idea that the players need to be excited by the premise of the campaign, not just the setting, not just where are we going to be playing, but what are we going to be doing? And that, I think, is what people generally mean by session 0, is just making sure the players are bought in and well educated. But if we're getting together to sit down at a table together, even if we're just making characters, I try to make sure, even if we're just making characters, something happens. I don't like the idea we all sit down and we spend hours making a character and then that's it, and we don't see each other for another week, and that's the real. No, if we're making characters, I want to make sure at least something happens in the game, because I don't really think of making characters as playing D&D. I think it's one of those things you have to do to play D&D, right? So yeah, I think it's important to have player buy-in. But I don't think it's mathematically possible to have a session before your first session, because then that's the first session. Chicken Soap 78 just threw me $5. No question. Fine. Thank you. I appreciate it. Jonathan Herzog, I recognize your name. Yeah, actually, Jonathan Herzog, we are probably going to get an MCDM species ancestry that would be more appropriate for a character like Slim. Yes, I do think that's going to happen. I don't necessarily think it's going to be in Arcadia. It might be in its own product, a guide to the timescape. I think that would be very popular and people would like that. But who knows when that's going to happen. Louis HS, £5. Been running a game for a few months now. The players seem happy and appreciative. How do I tone back the post-session self-criticism? So that you can relax. Don't relax. Be critical. Because that's how you get better. I don't have an easier answer for you. You'll I think I talked about this in the live stream we did. If you don't follow us on Twitch, you should, because we just recorded 2 videos, a running the game video and the second Dune video, and we broadcast it live on Twitch so you could watch the sausage being made. And we do that because making videos is not how people think. A lot of people watch our videos and they think it's just me speaking uninterrupted for 15 minutes. It's like, nothing could be further from the truth. It's a lot of work, dozens of takes over and over again, and then Jerry has to edit them all together. So that's why we do it, is because we want people to see, where their support is going and what the actual process is. And one of the things I said was that every time I do one of these videos, like by the time you see a running the game video, I have rehearsed it several times. I've written a script for it, and in the process of writing it, I'll stop and start reading it out loud. I'm literally sitting here in this chair, looking at this monitor, computer, reading the running the game script to myself, and I'm doing it, right? I'm doing it, I'm performing it. And those performances are all better than the running the game you see, because I'm not worried about my eye line. I can just, I'm purely focused on my tone of voice and the cadence and emphasis and being dramatic in the right places. And then we record the video. And because now I have to worry about the teleprompter and I have to manage the teleprompter, which I don't have to do here sitting at my computer. And that's kind of a pain in the ass. The running the game videos are never as good as the one I did at home. And after we're done recording, I feel like that was awful. This is going to be terrible. Everyone's going to notice how much worse it is than the earlier running the game videos. And then Jerry works his magic and spends usually like 3 hours editing one of these videos, depending on how long it is. It could be more. It could be 5 or 6 hours for like a half-hour long video. And then I watch the video and I'm like, oh, this is fine. So I have that post-game, post-recording running a video experience of being super critical. That never goes away. But what happens is over time you realize that, oh, I guess that's not that criticism I'm feeling is not that important. And you learn, you go, oh, well, I'm pretty down on myself now. But every time I do that, it turns out that it's fine. So you never stop being down on yourself. You never stop being critical. You should be your own worst critic. And you will get to a point as a dungeon master, as a writer, as a creative person, you will get to a point where you have mastered this thing, right? And I mean that literally in the sense of I was an apprentice, now I'm a master. The master's always learning. The master still has more learning to do. It never stops, right? But in the sense of apprentice, expert would be another word for it. You become an expert on this stuff, and then you will start being able to identify before you even put your work in front of anybody, which parts are definitely going to work. I know this is going to work because I've done it a million times. It always works. And which parts are kind of risky. Well, I've never done this before, or I'm going to try something here and we'll see. And so I got to the point working at Turtle Rock Studios, working on Evolve, where I would put stuff in front of people, and if they didn't like it, I would just be, got it, no problem. And I didn't need any feedback. I know what I wrote, and I know which parts are, and I could say, oh, no, that's fine. And I would take it away from, because often when you ask people for feedback, this is what you asked, by the way, this is just an extended answer. Often when you ask people for feedback, they have when somebody reads something or they listen to something or they watch something or they're playing D&D, they have a gut reaction to it, positive or negative, right? They have a gut reaction to it, but that reaction is not intellectual. It's purely reactionary. It's emotional. And then if you make the mistake of asking them what they thought, then they do something they had not done before. They turn on their brain and they start thinking. And everything that happens after that is artificial. That is sophistry. This is language and thought, but before that you had a reaction. And what you learn as a dungeon master is how to watch the table. It takes a while. This took me a while. It probably took me years, actually, how to watch the table and listen and get a read off of people. And you will learn over time which things that you're doing work and which don't work. And you're not going to need to ask your players for feedback. You know what worked and what didn't work, and you know whether or not they're having fun or not. You never stop being critical. You will always be the most critical, right? There's a whole album, one of the best-selling albums of all time, from a band who were so frustrated at the disconnect between themselves on stage and the audience and even the people around them. They would come off stage and the people who worked for them would be like, oh, that was so good. That was your best performance. But the artists, the musicians were like, that was terrible. That was one of our worst performances, but the audience loved it and you said you loved it and no one understood. It's called the wall, the physical wall, metaphorical wall that they turned into a physical wall that Pink Floyd experienced, because the performers know. There's another thing about how like the guy taking the free throw instantly knows as soon as the ball leaves their fingers, instantly knows if it's going to go in or not. People watching, even other experts, even other basketball players who have spent their whole lives practicing free throws cannot tell whether or not that shot is going to go in or not. But the dude who goes boom, as soon as he leaves his fingertips, he knows. So you will know. And it's never going to stop. That anxiety you experience will dull over time because you'll come to recognize, oh, I have this after every session and it's fine. There's a great quote from a great director and a great writer, Nick Myers, who wrote a movie. He wrote a movie a book, and then he turned it into a movie called The 7% Solution, which is kind of a genre mashup. It's Sherlock Holmes meets Sigmund Freud. That's a fake person who meeting a real person. And then he parlayed that into doing a screenplay and getting to direct his own movie for the first time. So there's a guy who was a writer who became a director, and his first movie is a movie I have a lot of affection for. It's not a great movie, but it's a really fun movie called Time After Time, in which it's another genre mashup in which H.G. Wells, a real person who really lived, who was a writer, invents a time machine. It's kind of glossed over how he does that. He was not a scientist. H.G. Wells was not an engineer, and he certainly wasn't like a particle physicist. But he invents a time machine, and before he can use it, Jack the Ripper steals it and uses it to come into the modern day, and H.G. Wells has to follow him through time and stop him. Brilliant, brilliant fucking movie. In spite of the fact that it's not a great movie, but I have a lot of affection for it. And the bad guy, Jack the Ripper, is played by David Warner, who went on to become kind of one of the classic movie villain bad guys. Before that, he was largely known as a theater actor. He did one of the landmark Hamlets on the West End. And Nick Meyer, the writer and director, tells the story of David Warner working himself up before every take and being really down on himself and just savaging himself and how awful he was and how useless he is. And then he would deliver and it actually got to the point on the set where his negativity about himself was distracting the crew and distracting the other actors and kind of bringing everybody down. And so the director felt like he had to do something about it. And he thought he was like being complimentary. And he went up to David Warner. He said, David, your performance is flawless. You are delivering a great performance. You are a great Jack the Ripper. You don't have to beat yourself up before every performance. I'm here to tell you it's going to be fine. You don't, but I continually see yourself bringing yourself down and destroying yourself before every take. And David Warner turned to him and said, well, then that's part of the process, isn't it? If A before B, and you're saying B is fine, well then A, if I'm beating myself up and then I give a great performance, don't take this away from me, because this is part of the process to get to this. So your anxiety and your being critical of yourself is part of the process. Part of the process. I missed a bunch of chats. I was wondering if you personally like if someone would take the 5th edition system, but completely rewrite the ancestries. That's fine. That's Creeper Box. Thank you for the 50 CHFs. Somebody could take like the it's called the D20 system. Roll a 20-sided die. Higher is always better. Add a number to it. Things like advantage and stuff like that. You don't need barbarians and hold person and swords to do that. I think actually isn't Starfinder a science fiction space opera D20 game? Yeah, absolutely, you can do that. Rachel Pope, $20. Thank you very much. What do I recommend for a person who enjoys world building? I think the challenge for a dungeon master who loves the world building, and that's what brings them to the table, is contextualizing the world building. Because lore generally lacks meaning. There's a great tweet from Lindsay Ellis. Either this was the original tweet, or she tweeted something else and then I rewrote it to suit my purposes. But what I remember is Lindsay Ellis tweeting and saying, no meaning, only lore. And their entire video games, some of them are quite popular, that I find completely lacking any kind of relevance to the human condition. Therefore, no meaning, but tons of lore that people love. The trick is, how do you take your world building and contextualize it for the players? Because the players did not come to the table for your world building. They came to play D&D. They came to roll dice and kill monsters. And if they didn't, then you're playing the wrong game. I can say that in a live stream. I can be more emphatic and more declamatory in a live stream. So then the question, the tendency among dungeon masters who love world building is to just completely go overboard and create all of this background lore for their world and use that in lieu of doing the work you need to do to Dungeon Master. In order to Dungeon Master, you have to create tension, you have to create drama, you got to put something in front of your players that hooks them. And usually the Dungeon Master level world building goes blah, 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 and keeps working. Oh, I'm not done yet. Oh, I'm not done. You're never going to be done, for one thing. A world is too complex a thing for one person to model even over an entire lifetime. The trick is focusing your world building on something that's relevant to the players, and that usually means something that has drama, right? Some central tension. That's why we did a very early running the game video on the central tension. And it usually means people, NPCs, people who this central tension is relevant to. As soon as you take your world building and find the central tension in it and then contextualize it in terms of characters who are struggling over whatever this dramatic tension in your game is, and then you put those characters in front of the players, or you put, somebody needs help because of dramatic reasons and the players are the only ones that can help. Now the players will start caring about these things because we relate to people. We don't relate to abstract ideas. We don't relate to heraldry and names and histories and the special abilities no, we relate to people. What do I think of Pathfinder? I don't think about Pathfinder. I have my D&D game, and if I wanted to play another RPG, it probably wouldn't be fantasy based, and if it would be a game that had nothing to do with D&D. It would not be so, and I don't even know why. I don't know why people, I honestly have no idea why people ask me that. I've never been able to figure it out. Wendy QZX original, $20. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Wendy. Thank you for generously sharing my perspective. Well, I hope it helps. That's really all I care about. I got a lot of people saying, when's there going to be another running the game video? And I that's always on my mind. And we will be getting more of them now, more videos in general and more running the game videos. Now that Kingdoms and Warfare now that the core design is finished. But I also feel like, hey, the reason I started doing these videos was because I wanted you to run D&D and I wanted you to know that it's easy and fun and you can do it. And I feel like I did that. So it makes me happy to see that people are being dungeon masters. I wanted to create more DMs and I think it worked. So from a certain point of view, my attitude is like, problem solved. I still want to keep making videos though. You'll get more running the game videos once the Chain of Acheron returns because there are always more lessons. In fact, there's probably like, 25, there's probably quite a lot. You could probably make 50 new running the game videos out of the campaign diaries, which very few people watched because for some reason they didn't think of them as relevant. So that's moving forward. That's what we're going to do. When I run D&D, instead of doing a campaign diary, I'll make a running the game episode where I take whatever I learned in that session and turn it into a new video. Then you'll get a lot more running the game videos, but who knows when that's going to happen. We've got to wait for a vaccine. That's cool. I love if people are like, I did not grow up. So what Wendy said was started 18 months ago to support their teenager. So this is presumably a parent, presumably a parent. D&D helped them feel comfortable exploring their non-binary identity. My experience playing D&D was my friends and I were teenagers when we started, and we did not really see D&D as a tool to express ourselves. But I don't think my friends did, but I did definitely use D&D as a way to get into other characters' heads. I distinctly remember the first time my friend John, my first DM, was running this giant, this like hill giant, and he was speaking to us in like broken English, right? And I remember asking him like, I don't remember what my character asked, but it was something about, are you dumb or do you just not speak common well? I phrased it better than that, right? And this giant was able to express the fact that this isn't their native language. And suddenly there was this second layer on top of the experience. It just didn't speak common well. And so for me as a writer, D&D was a great tool because I loved getting into other characters' heads. And slowly I would see my friends also start doing the same thing and playing characters that were different from them. And maybe that helped broaden our horizons. I don't know. But I love the idea that people can be playing D&D in a context that allows them to express themselves. I think that's one of the things people like about Critical Role, is that you can do all sorts of stuff with this hobby, and it doesn't have to be just killing monsters. It's certainly killing monsters, but it doesn't have to be just killing monsters. And that when I had friends, usually not members of my own group, other nerds I would meet who play D&D, and I realized these other nerds, it was literally just hack and slash for them. I was like, my God, like my friends and I were 16 and our games had incredibly detailed, complex politics and stuff in them. And I'm like, God, you guys are missing out. This is a crazy medium for storytelling. And any medium for storytelling is going to give people I just think it's important that I think if you're providing your children this safe space to create in, then they're naturally going to start using it to express themselves. That wasn't the context to which my friends and I were playing. But I think a nerd is just somebody, a child, whose parents protect them from social pressures. That's it. If you raise a child and you protect that child from the expectations of society, then they are going to develop their own idiosyncratic interests. And that is a nerd. A nerd is somebody who's got this super hyper-focused interest in whatever, right? Whatever. But it's not sport, entertainment, celebrity. It's not whatever the culture has decided are the only things that are okay to be obsessive about. And that's how you get nerds. So I love the idea that you're providing a place for your kids to play where they can be creative and express themselves. That's phenomenal. Certainly, my friends and I all got crazy good educations in probability, language. Gygaxian language is a real thing. Our vocabulary exploded thanks to D&D. And we were all math nerds, among other things, computer science nerds, And so we loved math, probability, statistics, all that stuff. Which Star Trek episode would I run as a D&D session? Apart from the first episode, thank you, Garrett, $10. Actually, I haven't checked in on chat for a while. Let me make sure that chat is well behaved. Oh, there are some questions in here that I missed. I'll get to them. Oh gosh, I don't know. That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, adapt. There are a lot of Star Trek episodes. I'm a big fan of the original series. It's got some of the best episodes on television. Also some of the worst. But I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. I can't answer that because the episodes that would inspire me, they would inspire me to run Star Trek stuff. Like the Run Silent, Run Deep episode. I would like to run an episode like that. I don't know. It's a good question. It is a good question. Let me go back and see questions people have posted in chat. Jenny Marshalls says, is there a way to encourage players to participate in the game outside of game sessions? That's a good question. The only tool you have is asking them questions. Hey, what are you folks going to do about blank? And at the end of the day, I always gauge the success of my game. This is one of the reasons I really, really, really do not like streaming the Chain of Acheron, even though we're going to keep doing it. Although we might do it in a slightly different form than the one we were doing it before, to make it more portable. But the only thing that matters to me when I'm running D&D is, are my players engaged? And I can tell if they're engaged when we get to the parking lot afterwards. And actually, that was at Turtle Rock, but at and everywhere else. But it's not unusual at the Chain when the cameras are off. When the cameras turn off for the Chain of Acheron, the players suddenly relax, and when they do that, they start talking about what just happened, and they start arguing about what just happened and what they should do next, and they start plotting and planning and scheming together. And you guys don't get to see all that because they are not performers. They don't like being on camera, basically. They don't mind it, but it's not for them. It's not, I can't speak for all of them, but generally speaking, that is the attitude is, oh, thank God the cameras are off. That tells you a lot about my friends and I. I'm the same way, by the way. And now that they're relaxed, and I always tell them, guys, you can have this conversation live, but they're like, I'm like, okay, that's fine. I don't want to push them, right? They're already doing me a favor by just playing D&D on my live stream. And that's how I know they're engaged. And that's the only thing that matters to me. Once we started streaming the Chain of Acheron, suddenly people expected me to care about other stuff that I don't care about, like how entertaining it is. What? I don't care how entertaining it is. I'm not entertained watching people play D&D. I don't find that entertaining. The only reason I'm doing this is so people can see my actual real game. The only reason I wanted to stream my game is because, well, two reasons. One, because I thought there were good lessons in there. Originally, running the game was going to be me recording our D&D streams and using them as B-roll to these examples. I would give an example, then you'd actually get to see it, but that was too big a production issue. And that's when I was like, oh, let me just cut that and just talk direct to camera, and that's how running the game happened. But also because I knew once running the game was successful, once running the game was a hit, quote unquote, I knew that people would watch running the game. I've told this story on the Twitch. I was at the Stream of Annihilation, the first big WotC stream. I was invited there to be a guest, and we all had Uber codes that we could use to get around Seattle. And we were all piling in. So we all shared an Uber, right? Why? And I jumped in an Uber with two other people, one of whom I knew, one of whom I didn't. And the person I didn't know was sitting in the back with me, and she said, hi, and introduced herself. And she asked me who I was, and I said, oh, my name's Matt Colville. And she was like, who are you? When what she meant was, why are you here? And I said, oh, I've got a YouTube channel. I've got a YouTube channel. And she was like, oh, and that wasn't enough. It still had to be calibrated. There's a great David Mitchell thing about him being on an airplane with an American. With an American. I don't remember his name. Let's call him Chad. No, that's too on the nose. Let's call him Biff. And it's a great, go watch that David Mitchell short. It's like 5 minutes long. It's brilliant. And so me saying I had a YouTube channel wasn't enough. It wasn't properly calibrated. And she said, like, how many subscribers do you have? And I said, I got like 100,000 subscribers at that point. And then she was like, oh, okay. And that was it. That was, as far as I was concerned, I had introduced myself. And the person who I knew, who was in the Uber with us, who was in the front seat, turned around and said, Matt is being modest. If there are 3 world-class dungeon masters, Matt is one of them. And when he said that, my heart sunk. And that was one of the moments when I was like, we got to stream our game. We got to stream our game because people watch running the game and they think that I am something special as a dungeon master. Of course, I think I'm something special as a dungeon master. Many of my players have thought that I was something special as a dungeon master, but some didn't. Some thought I was no great shakes. But I think of myself as a dungeon master as toward the top end of what a normal DM can do. That's it. That's literally it. I think there are some things I do as a dungeon master that are my kind of thing that maybe put it above the top. Everyone's like, when my friend Jim Murphy ran, after every session, I wrote up a short story about what had happened. That was one of the ways I learned how to write, because if I put it in front of my friends, they didn't like it. I was like, oh, that didn't work, right? So that was one of the ways that I was pushing. I did the same thing as a dungeon master myself, and that put my games over the top, right? But that was me as a writer. I was cheating. That was me as a writer. So I think of myself when it comes to a dungeon master, it's like, here's the normal range of normal dungeon masters who've been doing this for a while and have figured out how to do it. And I'm kind of toward this end of that, bad, good. But I think there are definitely dungeon masters in this category, and I don't consider myself one of them. And I did not want people to think that what I did, this is exactly antithetical to the entire point of running the game. I didn't want people to think that I was some kind of like supernaturally good dungeon master, because I do not think of myself that way. And I was like, I've got to start streaming my game because people are going to think I'm this kind of like supernatural. I'm not. My game is relatively normal, relatively straightforward. So that's why we started streaming it. And suddenly now people expect me to be entertaining, but that's not my goal. My goal is providing a good experience for my players. And I know when I've done that, if they're all talking about it afterwards. And that doesn't always happen. And when it doesn't happen, we stop playing. I cancel the campaign. I'm like, this didn't work. I don't blame the players. I blame myself usually. I'm like, well, I had an idea. It wasn't working, and we stop. So I'm not saying if it's not working, you should stop. But I am saying that, like, the one thing you can do is you can ask your players questions about this stuff. Hey, what are you guys going to do next week? Hey, what are you going to do about this? And see how they react. And if they don't react, well, then probably you're not playing with the right group. I don't know where this fallacy comes from, but we have inherited from somewhere, from someone, this idea that if we get a group of people together, that we should gel and we should enjoy playing D&D together. Nope, no reason to expect that. It's just as likely that it's not going to work and that these are the wrong players. That was a long answer. That was a long answer, but I think I answered it and I think I got there. Excuse me. When the hair gets long, it gets kind of like, I don't know how else to describe it. It gets kind of grody and I got to brush it to kind of. Slaven gave us RSD 250. I don't know what that is. Thank you for all you've done. Oh, you're running a Thomas Covenant inspired story. Ooh, I don't know that I would want to play in that. That would be crazy. But if that inspires you, that's awesome. D-Water 88. Oh, I got that. Sky McLaren Walton, any DMing lessons from the Chain Diaries I'd want to revisit in a separate running the game video? I don't know. There probably are. But I mean, I try to make sure that every campaign diary has the lessons in it. We've talked about this in other streams. I wanted when the players arrived in Capital, I wanted their experience to be, oh wow, there was some great, they should be like at the bottom looking up at all these great houses maneuvering and not know, are there good guys or bad guys? Who should we be supporting, if anybody? Do these people care about Ajax? How do we get them to care about Ajax? Oh, these guys seem to be really anti-Ajax, but also they're assholes. I don't know. I wanted that. I don't like running a campaign. I don't like it when the bad guys are... I like it when things are complex and it's not clear in black and white. But the problem is that gets frustrating for the players. So I like the idea that they show up in Capital, things are complex, it's not clear who the good guys or bad guys are. And what I should have done was given them a couple of sessions dealing with that and them feeling their way, and then have one of the great houses, and it should not be House Valletta, one of the great houses evolve into the clear enemy. Because players need clear objectives. They do not show up at the table because they want ambiguity and frustration. No. I think some of that is okay. The players are still participating in this dramatic narrative framework and they understand that. So some frustration at how complex things are is useful for verisimilitude, and the players will put up with it. And they'll even speak about it positively. Like my friend TJ said, I feel like I just got thrown into a George R. Martin book in the middle. He was being complimentary when he said that. But then, having established that, you need to give the players a break. You need to give the players a break and be like, here's the bad guy. It's clear who they are. Let's get off to the races. And I didn't do that. And that was a mistake. That was definitely a mistake. Also, I felt this insane pressure, probably because of precedent set by other streams, to run every week, which I don't normally do. I normally run for like 4 to 6 weeks, and then I take a break. And that break might only be a week or two, but it might be longer if somebody else steps up and runs. And during that time, we do downtime stuff. And that 4 to 6 weeks is an adventure, and then it stops, and then there's downtime. And we missed that downtime. I had a whole bunch, I still do, I had a whole bunch of content outlined, kind of sketched out for downtime adventures in Capital that would have been awesome. But now maybe they're too high a level for, but we'll see. There'll be more. So those are two things. Those are two things that I learned. Do I think that seeing someone's face is necessary for good roleplay, or is voice chat good enough? I do not. Alex, thank you for the $5. Well, when we played over Fantasy Grounds, we're gonna have to wrap the stream up soon because I'm starting to kind of get lightheaded from talking so much. Too much sound, not enough oxygen. Playing online using Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds can really enhance the players and the dungeon master's experience of role playing, because now they don't have to talk. Now they can type into chat, and they can do stuff like hit /E to emote, where it'll say their character, they're like, you know, if my character, if it's like, you know, Slim, Phil could in chat type /E, thinks this is a bad idea, but keeps his mouth shut. And then the players all see in text, Slim thinks this is a bad idea, but keeps his mouth shut, like it's an omniscient narrator describing this stuff. And suddenly, all of a sudden, for the first time ever in history of D&D role-playing, I was able to see my player's character's internal monologue. That had huge impact on me. So I definitely think that playing online with chat and stuff can make players. I had friends of mine who were not very talkative at the table, but suddenly now that they could type their responses, they were voluminous. That being said, I don't think there's any technological solution that can really replace face-to-face. Every Zoom call, every Discord call, you can't all be talking at the same time. It's impossible. When it's only two players, you don't notice it as much, right? One person talks, the other person listens. But even still, there's all this false starting stuff. I hate it. I hate it. And there's no eye lines to connect to. You don't get any of the visual cues. And no one seems to be working on any kind of technological solution to this that would actually simulate sitting at the table, looking around, eye lines, multiple people being able to talk, and it sounding and feeling natural. So I don't think the face is necessary, but I don't think it can be replaced. Thank you, Tim the Enchanter. I've seen you around here before, Tim. Thank you for the $5. Sorry, I'm going through old chat messages now. I'm trying to catch up. We may have to stop. It might not be possible to get caught up. Will unit cards have their full trait descriptions written or just the name? Just the name, and you'll have to look in the book to see what they are, because you can't fit. Some of these units have like 4 abilities, and some of these abilities are long. They just can't fit on a card. Also, you just shouldn't be trying to read the abilities on the cards, because you have to pick them up and read them and put them back down, pick them up and read them and put them back down, right? So you're going to have a list of what your units do, right? That's it. That's normal wargamer nonsense. Normal wargamer nonsense is, there's my mini. It's kind of like your character, right? There's my character. My miniature doesn't say what it does on it. That would be weird. But I've got a sheet here that tells me. That's it. And so, which is good, because there's no other way for us to do it, really. Do I have any favorite books on medieval history? I've got a lot of them. The one I recommend to most people is Terry Jones's Medieval Lives, not the show, the book. The book's really good because most people grow up with the Victorians' retconned version of medieval history, and Terry Jones' Medieval Lives is super easy to read. I've got tons of other books, and we'll probably do an Appendix M series, and one of the videos in Appendix M for Matt, as opposed to Appendix N, the one in the AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide. One of the videos will be on, here's all these books I read. If you feel like Terry Jones's Medieval Lives is too simple because it's really short, he was in Monty Python, but he's also a medievalist, so he knows his stuff. If you feel like that's too simple or too easy or too basic, then a next good place to start would be, actually, I don't know if I can recommend A Distant Mirror. A Distant Mirror is really useful. There's A Distant Mirror. A Time Traveler's Guide to Medieval England is really good. Religion and the Decline of Magic is really good for contextualizing how medieval people saw the world around them. There's a great quote, I think it's from A Time Traveler's Guide. I haven't figured out how to work this into a Running the Game video yet, but there's a great quote from A Time Traveler's Guide to Medieval England where the author talks about how, people would go on crusade. At this certain period, there were a couple of different crusades. And it's in the context of the fact that all through the Middle Ages, there were wars happening all the time, and these wars involved peasants fighting as soldiers, and they would sign up happily because it gave them the opportunity to go earn glory and maybe title and maybe loot. And so they in a given year, a random peasant might not travel more than 10, 15, 30 miles from their home. But in a lifetime, there would be usually at least 1 or 2 instances where they would sign up for some war and go to a faraway land, maybe quite far away. And he does a really good job of contextualizing, the author does, how we view the Crusades as this, typically, but not exclusively, typically as this opportunistic kind of blood for oil scenario where we're going to go to this foreign land and we're going to try to colonize them and oppress them because they have so much cash, and we're going to loot them, and we're basically pirates. And the whole thing of we're going to take over Jerusalem and we're going to return Jerusalem to its rightful owners, whoever they are. And the idea of the Crusades being holy is like a propaganda. And he says, no, it wasn't propaganda, but it also wasn't, it was both. It was both simultaneously. It was both a religious crusade that they believed in, and they thought that they were going to restore the Holy Land. They really believed that. in a way that might be difficult for a modern person to understand. And they also really believed that they were going to come back rich and with title, and these were not conflicting viewpoints, and it's not either or. And that kind of complex thinking is super useful for us as dungeon masters when we're talking about role-playing NPCs and building medieval societies. Then I actually think that A Distant Mirror is really good, but it's super academic. It's super academic. It's not an easy read. Tired. What's the most interesting monkeyed with monster I encountered in recent memory? I don't know. It's a good question. Well, I mean, the Black Iron Pact is a silly example, but it's a good one. We just recently we have I think it was Mackenzie de Armas designed for us a kind of MCDM version of Copper's Mount that is fucking cool as shit. I don't know if it's gonna be an Arcadia or not. We might just put it on Patreon. So that's a monkeyed with kind of sort of monster. Tips on creating a campaign set in a World War I style conflict. I don't have any, Karu. Thanks for the $5. That's a whole. That's a whole thing. That is beyond the scope of a stream like this. $20 from Reiko. Thank you very much. My God, that's almost an hour ago. I answered that already. Onslaught 6, $2. A Q&A just on, video production. That makes sense. I'm afraid the reality is, here we go. This is only 4 minutes ago. Thanks for the $5 reminder. I'm glad you enjoyed us. That Dune video is hugely popular. People love that video. Are the gods just playing a game? Wandering Weed says, when Leech was talking to his patron, she mentioned rules, like not being able to interfere directly. Are the gods just playing a game? Well, that's like, when the president breaks a law, but the people in charge of enforcing that law just ignore it. Are they just playing a game? I mean, many people now that they understand how American politics works and how most of American politics is tradition and not actual, like, they think it seems like a game to them. And one people have just decided to stop playing. Is that just a game? Well, it affects people's lives, and those traditions and those rules existed for a reason. But what happens when people start ignoring them? What happens when people start ignoring those rules? What happens if Balisandrax feels like it's worth it? You see some of that in Fighter. I think you see in the third novel. I think you see what happens when somebody disobeys the rules. It does not go well for them, but. Brian Garrett, $25. Thank you very much, Brian. Very generous. I really like your novels. Thank you. Have I considered doing a video showing off the usage of saints for divine spellcasting in D&D? Well, what is there to show off? In D&D, you pray to a extraplanar power, and that extraplanar power grants you access to spells. In AD&D, in the Dungeon Master's Guide, Gary broke down very specifically at what levels, like a low-level cleric isn't really doing anything different than a magic user is. And then a mid-level cleric, it's not a god that's listening to your prayers, it's some intermediary. And that's where I came up with the idea of saints. And then a high-level cleric, when they pray, the god listens, because there may be only one 18th level cleric on the entire planet of this god, right? So they have a more personal relationship. But do we need to run in the game video for that? That's all I know about it. That's the entire thing. Everything I just said, that was it. Can I explain my take, says Taylor Peppers, on the difference between divine, arcane, druidic, and charisma-based magics? Not in the context of a live stream, I apologize. But thank you for the support. That's like a Discord question. Folks in Discord could probably answer that better than I could. Rob Fair, $10. Thank you very much, Rob. Had a player leave their game because they weren't having fun. Well, I wish more people would do that. I wish more players would say, this isn't for me, you guys have fun. And I wish we could normalize that attitude, and not have it be this like, oh, I feel bad. You shouldn't feel bad. You shouldn't feel bad about this stuff. If I want my friends to have fun and they're not having fun and they're like, let me know. Then I might say, well, let's talk about it. But I might go, no, you're right. This isn't for you. But that should be okay. That should be normal. Hot dog flaps, $5. One thing Hot Dog Flaps struggles with is currency. In what sense? In what sense? You mean like converting? How do I recover from bad session? When the DM has made mistakes like messing up and visibly floundering? Well, if I'm the player and the DM had a bad session, like messing up the plot and visibly floundering, I just try to support them. Simon Larson. I just try to say, hey man, that was fine. There were still things in that session that I liked. Don't worry about it. Don't sweat it. You'll get better. That was one of the responses I saw to the last Running the Game video was people were like, I wish more players were openly supportive of the DM. But that being said, like, don't blow smoke up my ass, right? Don't say you had fun if you didn't have fun. But yeah, I mean, you know, you might wish your dungeon master was better, but then that means you should be running the game. Because there's not, you know, that dungeon master is not being paid. It's just something they're doing for fun. And if you're not having fun, well, maybe the only way you're going to have fun is you do it. You run the game. But yeah, if a DM had a bad session, I try to support them and encourage them. Any tips on playing the opposite gender? Just do it. I mean, I've never had any issue. The authors that I have read who impressed me the most with their ability to write members of the opposite gender, and this is me, different people have different expectations when it comes to this. The reason I was so impressed with this author and her ability to write a man, as far as I can tell, all she did was take all the shit that she deals with as a woman and put it in the head of a man. And I was like, oh, that's a guy that thinks just like me. Look, he's completely freaking out over this relationship that he's in, and he's obsessed over this, and he has these intrusive thoughts, and he's married, but he's in love with this other person, and all this stuff. I assume that she didn't have to invent all that. I assume it was just stuff that happened to her, and she put it in the, you know. I mean, are there differences between men and women? Yes. Are they the most significant thing? They're mostly cultural, probably, some biological, but otherwise I think that, you know. I mean, there was a great quote from Carrie Fisher, who sort of became an icon for like the strong female character, kind of a prototype, not an version of it. Princess Leia definitely like doesn't fuck around, right? She grabs a blaster and blasts a hole and gets them out of there. She's not going to wait for them to rescue her. Once the blast doors are open, she's like, let's get out of here. So that was a huge influence on me as a little kid. But she had a great quote where she's like, I don't understand why Princess Leia can't go shopping. And what she was saying was, I get that it's cool that this female character does this stuff that is typically associated with being masculine, and that's good, and we should be showing that, but why isn't it okay that she also likes the things that girls stereotypically like? Why isn't that okay? Right? And so that had a big influence on me and my writing. But both of those things did. So yeah, I would say just if you're going to play a female character, just play a character and say that they're a woman. And that's the first step. And maybe the dungeon master would concoct some scenarios where you would get to role play the way a woman might react to this differently than the way a man would. But I think those would be situations in which the woman was being treated differently because she's a woman. That's a great setup, by the way. It's a great drama. It might not be to your table's taste. Right? I would be very reticent to put that kind of stuff in my game, depending on my players, because that's probably not what they came to the table for, but that's great drama. It's great narrative. There's a great, so you play in Portal, you play a female character, and the writer for Portal is brilliant. At one point had GLaDOS, this is in the first or second game, I think it was in the first game, in an attempt on, GLaDOS is trying to get in the head of your character and kind of mess with you. And one of the things GLaDOS says is something about like, you know, maybe the cake isn't a good idea because it looks like you put on a little weight. And I was like, and that was, you know, that is something that I am not a fit person, but I used to be a fit person. I used to be an athletic fit person. And that was something that as I was putting on weight in my life, no one ever talked about that. No one gave a shit, no, because of the society I live in. But if I were a woman, that process would have been incredibly different. And that writer on purpose put me, a male character, in the shoes of a female character, saying, this is what it's like and you don't like it, do you? And I was like, oh, what? Well, in this scenario, the DM would have to be the writer and would have to kind of recontextualize normal things in a way that would make you be like, what did that NPC just say that my smile is pretty and I should smile more? Hey, fuck that guy. So it would be up to the DM, I think, to present challenges that would contextualize that difference. Otherwise, you're just a person and you're dealing with all the same nonsense that you would be, the opposite gender. It's mostly boys that do this, but not exclusively boys. The opposite gender is not alien. I am a human being, therefore nothing human can be alien to me. This is either good advice or bad advice, depending on your point of view. Oh, I'm scrolling upward now. What's my favorite Dune quote? Jack Rimble. Thank you for the support. Jack Rimble, I appreciate the kind words. My favorite Dune quote is probably, I think it's from the second book, and it is an epigram. Here lies a toppled god. His fall was not a small one. We did but build his pedestal, a narrow and a tall one. BLO, I don't know what that acronym is. $5. How do I feel about making big world changes when introducing new systems? I do that all the time. Every time there's a new edition of the game, there's like some kind of classic. I advance the clock 500 years or back a couple hundred years. Fourth edition, I invented Good King Omund and all the stuff that happened around him. Third edition, there was a adventure. It wasn't Night Below. It was another adventure where the players failed. And so then the players failed in second edition to save the world. And then in third edition, we started with the world being conquered by the bad guys. I do that all the time. I love that. Sean Northridge asks, are there any good recommendations on good Arabian Nights inspired settings? I don't know, but I believe I have seen some Kickstarter that's either launched or is going to be launched that is being written by people from that part of the world, or Americans who are descended from people from that part of the world. But unfortunately, maybe somebody in chat can help you with that. That's like a Discord or a Twitter question, probably. I'm a big believer in, there was a great live stream that featured a bunch of people of color talking about their experiences in D&D and how so much of these cultures in D&D, like my world, Orden, is transparently inspired by Earth analog cultures, because to me, that is what interests me. I love whenever I want to set an adventure in the uttermost north or in the infinite desert. That gives me an excuse to go read about the Vikings or go read about ancient Egypt. And that makes me a better person. I'm now more educated on different people in different parts of the world and how they lived in different times. And I find that is hugely broadening for me as a human being and as a dungeon master and as a writer. And I just don't believe in worlds. This is like the World of Warcraft syndrome. I don't believe in worlds that don't have that, where the dungeon master tried to create a planet that doesn't have anything in common with our real world, because that doesn't, to me, it just seems like they lack any sense of reality to them. They seem transparently made up. Like, these words are just a bunch of syllables you strung together. Look at all these apostrophes in here. This is classic fantasy science fiction nonsense that I find lacks verisimilitude. It's one of the things I admire about Tolkien, is how much work that dude did on language and inventing original words that sound like real words. He knew how to do that, and that's an important skill I think writers and DMs in the fantasy science fiction genre need. So to me, I like a setting, and I think I don't think there's anything wrong with being inspired by how people in another time or another place lived and the things they did. The trick is not being stereotypical. And the history of D&D, a lot of stereotypes. Because when you start reading about these cultures, they were just as complex as ours. They led just as rich and full a life as any of us do. And that's the thing you got to tap into. And in this live stream, the consensus seemed to be, it's okay if you're for instance, to pick a non-random example, it's okay if you're a generic middle-class, middle-aged white dude and you want to set a game in fantasy Arabia or in fantasy Japan. Just do some research and put something real in there. Don't make it stereotypes. And that, to me, that's my philosophy. So I think the way you do that is research. And I do think that if you're a professional, which now MCDM is, if we were going to do something like a Higara Fantasy Japan or something like Ix Fantasy Mesoamerica, that I would want to work with. First of all, I wouldn't want to write the fucking thing. I would want to pay other people to write it. And I would want to work with people who were from that part of the world. I would even really like to work with people who are experts, like college professors. Read this and tell us what you think. I don't mean like sensitivity readers. I mean authors. I mean people who are going to write the thing. It doesn't have to be exclusively that. It doesn't have to be we're all Japanese or Japanese Americans, but some people reading it and giving their feedback and participating in that process, just because I think it's going to produce a better product. What would I like to see in the ideal version of the Dungeon Master's Guide? I don't know. It's a good question. The first thing I would do is I would take out all the magic items and I would put them in the player's handbook, because I think the player's handbook, the players need to see the magic items because they need to be motivated. I want that. Where are these? Oh, well, there's a dungeon over here. Let's go. Thank you for the support, Lawler Wolf. How do I get my players more involved playing over Zoom? I don't know, J-Doy. That's tricky. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I feel like I'm the only one talking. Well, you got to ask your players questions. You got to not let them be passive. You got to say, what do you think about this? This person does this thing. Just ask them, like, how like in the middle of a speech. I do the same thing. I often do a lot, especially when I'm running a solo adventure. I end up doing so much talking. I have to stop myself and ask Gertz or whoever and say, how does your character seem right now? How are you reacting to these things? What's your demeanor? And get them talking. There's no magic bullet for it, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I don't think I can answer all these questions. I want to dip into... People are throwing money at me, and unfortunately... So let me stop for a second. We've been doing this for 90 minutes now. What do you folks think about how this stream has gone so far? Good, excellent, great. All right. Has anything I've said so far been super controversial? This guy's name is Gadzooks. Awesome, I love that. No, I know that Daniel Kwan, and the reason I didn't say Daniel Kwan is because that's not the answer. I know that Daniel Kwan is one of the people working on a Fantasy Asia game. That's not what I'm talking about. Otherwise, I would have said Daniel Kwan. And I think maybe Justice Arman is working on but I didn't want to say that because I didn't know if that was true. But I definitely know that there is a Fantasy Arabia setting somebody's working on. Was I trying to be controversial? Hanger flying, no. The problem with live streams being public, that you never know when you're a personality like I am. There's a YouTube video that just went up a little while about authenticity and how authenticity is the only thing that succeeds, but now it's failing. And it's a really interesting video, and I'm lucky that so far I haven't had that problem, but I never know when something I say is going to suddenly spark some kind of controversy. It happens. It's not my goal, but when I say something like, I think it's perfectly reasonable for a middle-aged white dude to fall in love with some other place and time and want to set a game there. The trick is just being respectful, doing your own research, and really digging in and finding something authentic that inspires you and imagining it complexly. There are people who would object to that very strongly and say, no, you don't get to do that. That's not your culture. How much time do I put in creating MTCs? Is she? That's awesome. Fantasy Philippines. I don't know anything about that. Potential collab with Dr. Cowboy Viking. Well, Nick Fisher, I had planned on having already at this point, having flown Dr. Viking down from whatever climes that dude lives in, down to Orange County to do a face-to-face interview. Just an interview about being a YouTuber. I want to do more videos where I interview other YouTubers. But alas, there is a global pandemic that my country is very poorly adapted to deal with. Some of the videos have ads. Yeah, no, we monetize videos now. I guess that's my version of the authenticity fails, because the whole subject of that video about authenticity is the only thing that succeeds on social media, and now it's failing, is all about how, like, you're hanging out with me now here in 2020, but you also can at any time go have the experience of me in 2015. Me in 2020 is very different than me in 2015. Me in 2015 was like, no ads. But me in 2020 is like, yeah, we're doing ads. And the reason we turned on ads, and we'll talk about this we're going to do a whole video about MCDM. Because of that, we're going to do a video about MCDM because of the fact that people go watch those videos and they think I'm still working at Turtle Rock, for instance, because to some people now, I'm to everybody at different times. People who come to the channel for the first time, they watch those videos from 5 years ago and they think that's me now. Me then, no ads. But then as I saw the YouTube channel grow, and I understand YouTube differently now, my attitude is I am providing all of this free content to another company, Google. I am giving Google all of this free content that adds value to their service. My YouTube channel, in a very small but meaningful way, my YouTube channel makes YouTube more valuable for people. And my channel more than a lot, I think, because a lot of the MCDM community on YouTube, they don't watch other YouTube channels. So I'm bringing all of these D&D nerds in who watch my videos and maybe go watch other videos, and that is an imbalance between me and YouTube. And so the way we correct that imbalance is we turn on ads. I'm doing this stuff for you folks. You folks can do something for me. It's not about generating revenue. I actually don't, this is going to sound, I'm not making this up. I actually do not have my bank account or the MCDM bank account hooked up to Google AdSense yet. So all of this revenue we've generated from ads hasn't yet been put into the bank account. I got to get on that. That shows you what I mean when I say it's not about generating revenue. It's about the fact that I think it's unfair that we're giving YouTube all this stuff. And so yeah, we turned on ads. And I don't mind that we have turned it on. I don't mind that I said one thing in 2015 and I feel differently about it now. I don't mind that. What we need to do is, and I think we can now, because YouTube changed how being partners work. Now people like Jerry and Anna and Lars can now curate the ads, which we couldn't do before. So Ashley asks a good question. Do I consider myself a YouTuber or an author first? In my bones, I'm a writer. Period. Also, in my bones, I'm a writer, and I have many. In my bones, I'm a writer. In my mind, I'm a game designer. In my heart, I'm a YouTuber. When someone asks me what I do for a living, I have no problem saying I'm a YouTuber. But that doesn't tell the whole story. So I think how much of Strongholds and Followers is made obsolete by Kingdoms of Warfare? I don't think any of it. Somebody was talking in the Discord about using the two, and somebody said, well, you probably have to convert units, but you don't have to. I don't think there's any conversion necessary. Just make sure that if Strongholds and Followers says you raise a unit of light veteran infantry, make sure that you use the units and the rules from Kingdoms of Warfare. That's it. Where is a Twitch streamer and all that? I'm not a Twitch streamer at all. I don't have it in me. Every once in a while, I think about trying to leverage the Twitch audience more, but that would require like streaming 5 or 6 days a week, and I don't have that in me. I don't have it in me. Twitch is a hobby. It's something I enjoy doing, but I can't take it seriously. I don't have time. And I don't have the temperament for it. I do not have the temperament for it. I'm not a good streamer. I'm not good in person because I get short with people. People ask dumb questions. People ask questions that I think are like, I often, and the people who've been in the streams for a while will tell you this, I often have petty thoughts about some of the questions people ask. And I think to myself, I do not comprehend the confusion of ideas that would lead you to ask a question like that. And I get sarcastic with people, and that's not good. And I regret it afterwards, but it's real, it's honest. That's who I am. So yeah, that's not good for the brand. So that's one of the reasons we stream less. Brendan Burke says, hope the family's well in lockdown. Yeah, I think apart from the fact that like Tom Schmuck and Tom Jacobson both had to evacuate because of fires, but they now are back in their homes. So that was only a day or two of inconvenience for them. We missed you, Matt. Thank you, Michael. Just played through the warfare part of Castle Rend, and my buddies wanted to maneuver their armies to gain advantage over the Knoll army. How would I have let them do it? Oh, well, I mean, I would have just asked them, what are you going to do? Like, the Kingdoms in Warfare has a lot more robust answers to that. But using just like strongholds and followers, if they want to get advantage over the Knoll army, I would just ask them, how are you going to do that? And then I would have it probably be based on, you need a good idea. And okay, that sounds good. Now roll. Now make some roll. Let's tie it to some skill or ability. Skill challenge. High school teacher vibes. I think a high school teacher would have been good. Maybe college. I don't know if I would have the temperament. I don't know if I would have the temperament to be a teacher. I do think of myself as an educator, unironically, every once in a while. In a real sense, that's what running the game is. It's an educational series. But being a teacher is an incredibly hard work, and I would not have the patience for it. I would not have the patience and discipline for it, and I knew that when I was a kid. It's a colossal amount of work, and it's somewhat thankless. And I live in a culture that does not value education. Period. I live in a culture that does not value education. It does not value art and does not value science. And I would not want to be on the front lines of trying to fight that battle because it's a losing battle. Will sieges be meaningfully different mechanically from a battle in the field? Yes. Hunter weight. The default assumption is that all battles in the Kingdoms and Warfare system are a siege. The only question is, who's the better commander? And the better commander is able to have the battle happen on their terms, which usually means we're going to defend our castle and we're going to maneuver you to attack us instead of us attack you. So the assumption is that there will be fortifications and one side is attacking, one side is defending. But you can't also just meet in a field in the middle. How do I decide how often to use an NPC? I don't know what the unit of measurement is for frequency of NPC use. That's never been an issue for me. What's this music? It's used by permission. It is State Azure on YouTube, a musician, a composer who uses a lot of modular synths, but not exclusively. Modular synths in their work, and that's how I got turned on to them because that's a big hobby of mine. Ninja Guy, yes, this is a cover. State Azure does a lot of covers of Tangerine Dream, but a lot of their own original stuff too. Aaron says, I want to thank you greatly for getting you interested in Dune. You didn't meet, I'm happy to be the catalyst, but you would have got there. Dune is probably the most famous science fiction novel ever written. You didn't need me. Do we just throw out questions? No. Any thoughts on Tasha's Cauldron? None. I'm not running D&D right now, and when I am, I usually try to make my own content. I don't know that I've used any of WotC's content besides the 3 core rulebooks. Nope. I don't think I've used any 5th edition content besides the 3 core rulebooks. What's my experience of other RPG systems that try to be setting independent? Says Alex. Thank you for the $5. I ran a Champions campaign, which is a hero system, but I think most people who use hero use Champions, the superhero rules. For 3 years, we played every week. It was actually a couple different campaigns. We often were playing more than one time a week in different groups. That's my experience with it. Do I like the Foundation trilogy? I've read it. I don't think it holds my interest now, but I liked it a lot when I was a kid. Yeah, I use monsters. Yeah, I use monsters outside of the core rules all the time. That's true. Have you read Ender's Game? Yeah, I wasn't the right age. You need to be like. I'm not a huge fan of that book. Why do I think D&D's got as popular as it in recent years? I think it's a combination. I think that the real reason D&D is more popular now than it used to be is because the generation who grew up playing D&D as kids are now adults, and they have money, and they want to get back to that hobby, and it has some cultural cachet. And then Stranger Things had a huge impact on showing people this is that thing that we were doing in the 80s, and in a digital world, that analog fantasy I think has a lot of fun for people of all ages and all walks of life. They watch those kids and they're like, wow, that looks like fun. And then of course Critical Role had a huge impact because it showed people an example, which is you cannot understate the value of here's an actual example. What are my thoughts about WotC getting rid of negative stats in the next edition? I'm not as down on that as other people are. I as a designer and as a player do not have a problem with some stats being positive and some stats being negative. But I do appreciate the point of view, especially when Dungeons and Dragons inherited that Victorian idea of race, which is largely the American idea, which we all get from the British Raj, where you have you mistake biology for culture. They're intertwined in D&D. And they're intertwined in Strongholds and Followers. We do the same thing. We treat elves as not just a species, but a culture. And I don't really have a problem with that. But when you start mixing those things together, biology and culture, then saying these people have a negative stat starts to get tricky. And I definitely, as a designer, appreciate the value of having it's good design to say, don't punish people for doing the wrong thing, reward them for doing the right thing. That being said, even though that is good design, I have no problem with negative penalties, but I also have no problem with just adjusting the math and making them just different positives. So I think we're done. Obviously, there would be many more questions that we can answer, but we've already been going for almost 2 hours now. Why is the Dune game so good? Because of its lack of randomness. The fact that it's direct interaction. A lot of modern board games aren't games, in my opinion. They're puzzles, and we're each trying to solve the puzzle using different algorithms. And then at the end of the game, we add up our cubes to see whose algorithm was best, and that does not interest me. But Dune is you're fighting, you're competing. It's direct. There's no any random element in the game. Some player knows what that is before it affects the board. No dice. And it, better than anything else, it simulates the politics of Dune. So thanks for hanging out, everybody. I hope you folks enjoyed the stream. I don't know when the next run in the game video is or what its subject is going to be, but I know what the next video is. And the next video is about Dune. It's the second in the Dune series. We've already written it and recorded it. It'll probably go up next Wednesday or Thursday. So thanks for hanging out, everybody. Thank you to the mods, the enormous amount of work the mods do to keep our chat cool, to keep the community awesome. The way you do that is you heavily moderate and you make sure that people who are wankers or wangrods don't dominate the chat. And we wouldn't be able to do that without the mods. So thank you to the mods. I hope you all have a great weekend. I hope you're all staying safe. Remember to wash your hands before you go out, wear a mask. And I don't know when the next time we're going to do a live stream is, but it'll be after the next run in the game video. And we do live streams on Twitch every once in a blue moon now. Subscribe on Twitch if you want to get an alert when we do. So thank you for hanging out. I thought this was a great stream. People asked great questions and we told some good stories. Until next time, be seeing you.